Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on drought, early warning and preparedness. It's great to have you with us and we hope that you and those close to you are doing really well. My name's Gareth James Lloyd and I have the pleasure of being your host for the next hour and providing technical support. I have my good colleague Maya Bertoulé. Maya and I work at the UNEP-DHI Centre and our role is to provide technical support to the UN Environment Programme on water environment issues. Before we move on, for the sake of good order, I've been asked to say just a few words about water scarcity and drought, just to define those a little. Water scarcity and drought are closely linked, of course, and often happen as demand and supply issues in the same place at the same time. But they're not, of course, the same thing. In very simple terms, water scarcity occurs in a situation where water demand outstrips water supply, whereas droughts are prolonged shortages of water due to supply issues, for example, a lack of rainfall. Droughts can be devastating socially, economically, and environmentally. I don't think I need to go into lots of examples of those. And as many of you, I'm sure, know, the number of droughts as well as their intensity is increasing in many parts of the world. The good news is, though, that it's not all death and destruction, or at least it doesn't have to be. Help and guidance is on hand to boost the resilience of people and ecosystems. And if you hang around a little while here, some people far cleverer than I will tell you a little bit more about that guidance. Yeah, and here they are. So today we're very pleased to have three experts with us who are going to be sharing their knowledge on drought and drought preparedness. Just to quickly run through, kicking off things, we have Jeroen van Dalen of UNCCD giving us an introduction to the UNCCD-led Drought Toolbox. Next up, we have my colleague at the Centre, Bertrand Rachel, who will be giving us insights into UNEP-DHI's work on drought early warning. And rounding things off, we have Daniel Segai of UNCCD, who will be providing highlights of the UNCCD Drought Initiative and beyond. So without further ado, I'll ask Maya to pass control of the slides over to Jeroen so he can begin. Jeroen, please, could you unmute your mic whenever you're ready?
Okay, no, thank you very much. And also thank you to UNEP-DHI for organizing this and for inviting us. I am Jeroen van Dalen. I work at the UNCCD Secretariat based in Bonn, Germany. UNCCD Secretariat services the parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Looking at the UNCCD Convention to Combat Desertification, it's one of the so-called Rio Conventions, which was conceived at the Earth Summit in 1992. Was adopted in Paris on June 17, 1994. That also means that June 17, which we had last week, is always sort of a special event in the sense that it's the birthday of the convention. It's a day when we celebrate around the world for all the people who are involved in implementing the convention and working on the topic of desertification. The objective of the convention is to combat desertification at all levels and always in partnerships. Our partners, of course, are also all the countries that are members. We have 197 parties at the moment. So if we look at desertification, is linked to land degradation. So there's two very important topics within the implementation of the Convention to Combat Desertification, which is land degradation and drought. If we look at drought and land degradation, at the moment there's already 500 million hectares of degraded and abandoned agricultural land. And more than 12 million hectares of arable land that continues to be lost annually. With an increasing world population, this is creating problems in food production, where you need more land and not less land. and looking at all the services that land provides. So in that sense, land degradation is very much central to many of the sustainable development goals. It links to biodiversity, it links to food, it also links to security, because we do see that there is a strong link between conflict, forced migration, and land degradation. But what's also a very important point to mention here is also carbon storage. When you look at the Paris goals, reducing CO2 emissions, a lot of CO2 gets captured in the soil if you manage the soil well. So that's why we care about land degradation. If you're looking at drought, the topic of the webinar today, the parties to the UNCCD started at COP13, which is about 2.5 years ago, a drought initiative, which focuses on getting countries ready and better prepared for dealing with drought. The main goal here, as you see, on which my colleague Daniel will also talk a little bit later, but the main goal here is also to get countries and regions to move from reactive response to drought to proactively being prepared for drought. To do that, there are 3 pillars that I want to highlight here. First one is monitoring and early warning, which we'll be focusing on today. Vulnerability assessments and risk mitigation measures. Those 3 together form the main pillars for a proactive drought response. And this is also how we have organized the Drought Toolbox, which is a toolbox that we've developed together with partners to help countries develop national drought plans. So looking at the Drought Toolbox, there's a number of partners that we've been working with, and what we do in the Drought Toolbox is that we bring all the tools together that different organizations already had to offer. So we're not really developing that many new tools for countries to deal with droughts, because most of the tools are already available, but we're organizing and structuring them in a way that can help countries develop national drought plans that are proactive based on the 3 pillars that you see listed here as well. Some of the partners contribute to specific pillars, like we work with UNEP-DHI, also in the organization of this webinar. We have a very strong focus on offering tools to develop monitoring and early warning systems. We also work with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, who are offering tools that also fall for a large part in the 3rd pillar, when you look at drought risk mitigation measures. And the Joint Research Center of the European Union, they did a risk assessment, a global risk assessment, which is also featured in the 2nd pillar. So if you look at the Drought Toolbox, and I want to just go there here, you can find the Drought Toolbox on the UNCCD homepage. You search there and go to the Drought Toolbox. Drought Toolbox looks like this. There's the 3 pillars that you see here that I was just talking about, and that's how we have ordered and structured the various tools that are available. First, looking at monitoring and early warning systems, we see the Drought Toolbox also as sort of like a Lego box that has like all the different building blocks, because in the end, when you look at monitoring and early warning, but also at the other pillars, then it's important that countries develop their local systems, because most of these cannot necessarily be developed at a global scale and then still be effective on a local scale. So in the 1st pillar, we offer various building blocks that can help you develop early warning systems. It's also something that we work with UNEP-DHI, but also with WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. So we offer a database of all the building blocks that you can search like this. You can answer some questions some basic questions. You can skip questions if you don't know the answer. And then you get a different search with all the different building blocks that we currently have available and that are collected in the Drought Toolbox. In the next presentation, you will be seeing a little bit more from the UNEP-DHI tool, which you see as sort of like a Lego starter set, which is like contains the building blocks that we feel are relevant for countries to develop drought monitoring systems. That are also available in a very easy to access way. You will learn more about that from the second speaker in this webinar. Looking at the second pillar, vulnerability and risk assessment, the main message that we want to get across here is that when you're developing a proactive drought response, it's important to look at how you calculate the drought risk, which you do by calculating vulnerability times hazard times exposure. There's one drought risk visualization tool which was done by the European Union Joint Research Center, which we have available here, where you can find the drought risk maps based on a global assessment of the drought risk. But there's also, again, like in the other pillars, you can search different tools that are available by simply answering a few questions and search through the database of tools that's available here. Risk mitigation measures, where we provide tools that can assist countries in mitigating the risk of drought. This is, of course, also where the UNCCD perspective comes in, because with risk mitigation is very closely linked to land management. The Drought Toolbox of the UNCCD is integrated in the UNCCD Knowledge Hub. The UNCCD Knowledge Hub provides tools for countries to deal with land degradation. This also includes, for example, sustainable land management technologies and approaches. So all of that is integrated here, but you can also see that there's various tools that are offered by different partners like FAO and Global Water Partnership, etc. Third pillar, you will find the same structure that we have in the other pillars. You can find solutions by answering some basic questions. If you indicate which country you're interested in and working with, we will refine the solutions that are actually listed here to list the ones that are more relevant for your country or region. And then there are other questions that are basically in this system that just help us filter the solutions that we offer. And the building blocks essentially that you can use to work on drought risk mitigation. So you can see that there's examples related to sustainable land management in the database, but there's also tools that are offered by the various other partners. Overall, in the Drought Toolbox, the whole goal of the Drought Toolbox is to assist UNCCD parties in developing national drought plans. So when you go to the chapter that you find here on the left on drought planning, you can also find more information about how countries and regions are working on developing drought plans. An important section here as well is an overview of national drought plans that have been developed by countries that we publish here also as examples. So here you find, for example, the National Drought Plan for Sudan. And we publish this here so that other countries that are working on developing national drought plans can also get inspired and can look here to find examples of what other countries are doing. All in all, we see that drought is an increasingly important issue in many countries. Basically, all countries in the world right now are dealing with drought, also countries where you weren't necessarily expecting it. So drought is an important topic that is only gets aggregated by climate change, and that many countries around the world need to find ways to deal with. And we hope that by offering these tools like these, we can help countries to be prepared, but we can also facilitate countries to also help other countries in dealing with drought. Because when drought happens, it doesn't stick to national borders. So it's important for countries to help each other, to share the tools that they develop, and to make the tools available that people can use to develop proactive national drought plans. Thank you very much.
And thanks to you, Jerome. That was a very interesting introduction to the Drought Toolbox. If I could ask you to now mute your microphone and stop sharing your screen. And then if I could ask you, Bertrand, as soon as you can, to start sharing your screen.
Thank you, Garrett. My name is Bertrand Richaud, and I'm working for the UNEP-DHI Center. Today I have the pleasure to give you insight into the UNEP-DHI Drought Early Warning System, which is part of the Pillar 1 of the Drought Toolbox, which was presented by Jeroen in the previous presentation. So this presentation will be divided into two different parts. I'll give you a short introduction to the portal, and then I will move to a live demo of the portal itself, so you can actually get a feeling of how it works and how it's being used. Maybe before starting, I would like to give a bit of history of this this portal that we have included into the Drought Toolbox. It was initially developed as part of a large GF project implemented by UN Environment, where DHI worked to develop tools to support planning at transboundary basin level. As part of this project, we developed a portal with a series of applications, including application tailored to actually for drought early warning, drought monitoring and forecasting. So then once we had this portal available, we actually started a partnership with UNCCD, and we adapted this tool to the needs of the UNCCD Drought initiative to be then part of the Drought Toolbox. So this portal that is available for all countries or part of the Drought initiative gives access to near real-time data. It has also a facility to report for generating reports in an automatic way. So, as mentioned by Jeroen previously, it is really a tool that we want to disseminate to all countries that don't have today their own national monitoring system, or this tool can then complement their existing drought monitoring and early warning system. The tool is actually relying on different type of data sets. As you know, droughts can be described in different ways. We talk about meteorological droughts when we refer to, for example, rainfall. And that's why the portal has access to a number of climate data sets, for example, rainfall, temperature, evaporation. When it comes to when the drought develops, then the impact is often observed on the soil moisture. And that's why we have included a data set that is actually called Soil Moisture Index that supports monitoring of the soil moisture content. And when the drought developed even further, then the impact can be seen on the vegetation cover. That's why we have one key data set that is actually monitoring the vegetation cover on the ground. We have also included a number of socio-economic data sets which are normally used to assess the vulnerability. While the three previous data sets are used for assessing the drought hazard, when looking into the risk, it's important to take into account vulnerability. I won't go too much into detail in that because I think this is also part of the last presentation of today. And I'll mainly focus on the first three data sets that we have. So we have data, but actually what we are interested in is indicators that help us to convert a complex measurements into a meaningful value, a meaningful number to be interpreted. And for this, I have a very simple example here to exemplify a bit what we are doing, the methodology we have used. We have someone who is ill. That's the issue. We will use a thermometer as an indicator to measure the body temperature. And based on a specific threshold, for example, above 38 degrees Celsius, we can say the patient has fever. So that basically from the issue, we determine an indicator that gives us an indication about the states. We can do basically the same with droughts. We will use a number of indicators that can tell us the states, whether there is a drought or not, a type of drought. For example, we talk about meteorological drought. We can go even a bit further because we can say also how severe is the drought. So it's not a green and red flag, but it might be, it will be a bit more complex. But in short, that's what we use. If we take this example, but now we apply it to the data we are using in the portal, I have here the example of a vegetation cover for Thailand. This vegetation cover, so this is a data, this is NDVI data for Thailand. It's just telling us about how green or not the specific area is in the country for a specific date. What we are interested in here is to know actually how is this situation compared to normal? How does this deviates from the long-term average we have observed? So we have a number of indicators, for example, deviation, anomaly, that help us to compare the current situation to normal condition. And then we can get another type of map like this one, which give us indication about areas of the country that are experiencing here a deficit of vegetation. So there is less vegetation for the specific time of the year that is normally observed at this time. And we can see some green areas here where the vegetation cover is higher than expected, and the red area where the vegetation cover is lower than expected. So the portal looks like this and basically gives you access to these different data sets as a map, but we also have a number of tools to basically analyze these different data sets. We can, user can actually plot time series from there. There is a type of plot that gives us indication about the extent, how, for example, here we have a specific catchment that we have selected, and we can see how much of this catchment is under a specific drought categories according to the time here. So we can see some red peaks here where a large part of the catchment is under a severe drought category for the indicator that was selected. So these different tools gives us actually a facility to analyze data that is part of the portal. I will show you a little bit more when I do the demo afterwards. One last key functionality of the portal is a report generator application that allows user to basically configure a report that is then automatically generated by the system on a regular basis. and that includes the latest information of the portal. This allows basically to get an overview of the situation in the selected area without having to go into the portal and check all the data sets. So I think now I will switch to the portal and give you a short intro on how it looks like and what can be done with this UNEP-DHI portal. So to get started, you can basically go to the webpage that was presented by our first speaker, Jeroen, which is the Drought Toolbox on the UNCCD homepage. And there, after you select the pillar 1, the droughts monitoring early warning, you can have access to the UNEP-DHI tool by clicking on this button here at the bottom right. So you are then directed to the portal itself, where you need to register or log in if you have already made your account. It's free to create an account. The account is mainly used to keep information. For example, if you have configured a report, the system will remember the report you have configured, and next time you log in, you can access this information. So once you have logged in, you have the possibility of accessing the 2 applications that I have mentioned in the previous presentation. The data information, which gives access to the near real-time data sets. When I say near real-time, we actually have an automatic procedure in the back of this system that will collect data from different sources and make sure they are up to date within a few days delay at most. And the reporting application to configure the report that will be generated by the portal and sent automatically to specific email addresses. So here, when I register, I had selected that I wanted to look at Ghana. So this is my country of interest. When you register, you can choose other countries, part of the Drought initiative, if you are interested in another country. So when clicking on this data and information application, the first thing you would see is the map, and on the left panel, the different data sets that are available. If you don't see this data set, you can actually use the select button here to select the data set you are interested in. For the purpose of this demo, I have selected all the data sets, but you can actually filter out those you are mainly interested in. And for example, here, I'm now selecting a rainfall data set. This is data from GPM. This is daily. We are resampling into daily data. So we have one image, I can say, per day of the rainfall over Ghana. The portal allows you to zoom into specific areas if you want, and to also extract time series to look back in time how was the rainfall, either as an average, or you can use this time axis here to go back in time and display the rainfall for a specific date. So now I'm, for example, looking over the period of February and March, when there was actually almost very little rainfall. The rainy season starts in Ghana normally around March, April, but maybe we can see that this year it was slightly delayed. Now I have switched to an index that is actually calculated from this rainfall data sets. This is the SPI, Standard Precipitation Index 1 month, a well-known index that is used to basically quantify how rainfall is compared to normal. So we are now looking at the rainfall over the last months, and we have a comparison basically how this rainfall was compared to the normal. So the normal being the record we have here, which is 20 years of data. And we can see that the northeast and northwest of the country are currently experiencing a lack of rainfall.
2 minutes, please, Bertrand.
Yes,
thanks.
I will conclude very soon. So this indices can also be analyzed in terms of time series. We can look in time and back in time, how was this index? And we can see over the last year, there was actually a severe meteorological droughts occurring at the start of March. So we can see, and this can actually be seen by looking at the map, we can see a red hotspot in the mainly north part of the country. We can just quickly go to different data sets looking at soil moisture, and we can see that currently as of the 11th of June, which is the last image we have of soil moisture, is we can see the north of the country is still experiencing a lack of soil moisture with red areas. We have a number of indices that also allows us to see how this compares to normal, and we can see there is a deviation, negative deviation. So that's confirmed that there's still a lack of soil moisture content compared to normal in the north. We can also look at the vegetation cover and the deviation to normal. We can also observe that north part of the country is still under a slight negative deviation, so a lack of rainfall, of vegetation. So this, we can see the drought has developed from a lack of rainfall to lack of soil moisture and impacted on the vegetation. There is many more data set that can be explored here, but I will just advise you to basically try it out, log in. So either start from the UNCCD Drought Toolbox or use this link here that is displayed, and that will be also given in the recording. We are, just to conclude, this Drought Toolbox here was so then adapted to UNCCD needs. We have basically made available a number of drought indices. DHI, UNEP-DHI is continue the work on actually including improving and in particular the forecasting parts. We are currently working on including results of our global hydrological model to be able to forecast soil moisture contents and to basically complement the different type of data we can use for drought monitoring and forecasting. Thank you.
Many thanks, Bertrand. Could I ask you to stop sharing? Daniel, could I please ask you to start sharing and unmute your microphone? So Daniel, we can see your presentation. I think I can hear you. So please feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you also for my colleagues for the two excellent presentations. For me, I'm just going to give some kind of highlight of a general bigger picture of the drought initiative in the UNCCD and beyond. So first of all, let me say something about the UNCCD. I think my colleague Jeroen van Dalen has said something about the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. We had a strategic objectives guiding action on what we do for the next 10 years until 2030. And one of the strategic objectives for the UNCCD is to deal with drought. And this is strategic objective 3, to mitigate, adapt to, and manage effects of drought in order to enhance resilience of vulnerable population and ecosystem. So we deal with human beings and livestock and agriculture, but at the same time also with the ecosystems. So these are the two important aspects. We are not per se dealing with minimizing the incidence of drought, but how can we minimize the impacts of droughts? Let me give some kind of highlight probably on pictorial representation of this. How large is the problem of drought? It's very large. As you could see, global map of drought vulnerability. You can already see that almost like 70 or 80% of the global map is now in dark red in terms of the hazard. But the risk is minimized. I'm going to come into what I mean by hazard. The hazard is a drought incidence, but the risk is equal to like hazard, vulnerability, and exposure. And so when you minimize the risk, as you can see, for example, Australia and the US, they have a very big hazard in terms of drought incidence, but the risk on drought is minimum, low risk. Why? Because they were able to minimize the vulnerability to droughts, the exposure to drought. So we are just trying to play around these two variables. That's why we see on the right side, the dark blue on Australia, for example, they played around the variables on vulnerability and exposure. So UNCCD's approach to drought are the three key pillars: monitoring and early warning systems. I think this has been explained very well by my colleague also, Bertrand. Vulnerability and risk and impact assessment, and drought risk mitigation measures. So we are trying to help countries to come up with these three key pillars on drought monitoring and on drought preparedness. On pillar one, drought early warning and systems typically aims to first track, access, and then deliver relevant information in terms of climate, hydrology, and water supply condition. So the objective is to provide timely information. For whom? For policymakers, but also at the same time also for end users, farmers, for example. Early onset, for early information is not early action. So we need to make sure that we need to reach out everyone that is going to be beneficiary of this use the drought risk management plan as a means of reducing the impacts. So diligent, integrated approach is vital for monitoring such slow onset hazard like drought. As I said, I was just trying to show you the two maps. The risk on drought is the most important thing that we are trying to work on. Hazard is a probability of a drought event with a certain severity. So it is going to happen because of climate change. Drought frequency, severity is going to increase in terms of spatial extent also. So this is an exogenous factor, a factor at least within the perspective of the UNCCD that we are not influencing. It's about mitigation. But there is also exposure. Who is living? Who is going to be affected? Amount of population, livelihoods, assets, resources, services. Are they going to be affected? Who is going to be affected? Who is going to be there? The other thing is vulnerability, the susceptibility or the sensitivity to suffer adverse effects. Vulnerability has two components. One is sensitivity. For example, agriculture is more prone to drought than, for example, the industry, because 70% of water use goes to irrigation for agriculture. So it's water intensive. So water intensive sectors are going to be more affected. And the coping capacity, do you have the knowledge? Do you have the technology? So exposure and vulnerability are very important factors in order to minimize the risk on drought. So as I said, risk is sector specific. The other one is implement measures to limit impacts of drought. So once you have these two tools, then the next thing is identify, test, and implement actions. Not all solutions work everywhere. Water harvesting, for example, it's a very interesting tool, very important to minimize impacts of drought, but it doesn't work everywhere. So if you have a seasonal variation on drought, on rainfall, but you have a lot of rainfall in one season, and then so you can do some kind of artificial groundwater aquifer recharging and making sure that you can use it for irrigation. So water harvesting, as an example, I give you, or many structural and non-structural measures. I think Jeroen has already put it in a nice way, a number of tools that we are trying to help countries to come up with. Reality specific, if you click on all these things, you just say where you are, what type of problem do you have, and then you can come up with some structural and non-structural measures. It can be policy, it can be also some infrastructural measures. So policies and actions should be pursued to diversify and modernize agriculture. So I can give you a number of examples for limiting the impacts of drought: irrigation, rainwater harvesting, monitoring, water supply and use, recycling and reuse of wastewater. So we are just trying to adapt to this kind of solutions, case-specific solutions. This has also been already mentioned by Jeroen, but repetition is learning. We are trying to close the cycle. The business as usual approach for countries is to react to drought. Drought comes as a surprise. You do emergency relief, assess the impacts, recover, restore. That's where the story ends. That's the business as usual approach. So we try to close the cycle by making sure that countries work on drought in non-drought times. As you could see, these are the three aspects that we are trying: early warning and monitoring, making sure that the information is disseminated to users, making sure that countries have a drought risk profile. They map who is going to be affected and why, and what are my options, case specific. What kind of resource do I have and how can I mobilize them? So in the UNCCD Drought Initiative, we are supporting countries on national drought preparedness plans. For example, many countries claim to have a national drought plan, but they just have a plan on how to respond. But we are trying to make sure that countries have a plan to prepare for drought. We are also working on regional efforts to reduce drought vulnerability and risk, because countries can learn from each other, especially countries in a specific region. Droughts affect, it doesn't know political boundaries, so countries can learn from each other, especially neighboring countries. And the toolbox that has been well explained by my colleague. So this is a UNCCD drought toolbox that you can also click on, and I think it has been well explained. The toolbox was launched at COP14, and we are supporting about 70 plus countries to who are participating in these national drought preparedness plans. 35 of them have already completed their national drought plans. So the national drought plans based on the principles of risk reduction. This is very important for us and also for many countries. The other thing that we are doing at the UNCCD is the piecemeal approach. Trying to react to drought will not work. Let's have a sustainable, long-lasting, and institutional approach to drought management. So the UNCCD, the Conference of Parties in India at September 2019, established an intergovernmental working group so that they can come up with an effective policy and implementation measures for addressing drought under the UNCCD. So what they are doing at the moment is, first of all, they are stock taking and reviewing existing policy. What do we have? What are the implementation and national coordination frameworks? What kind of challenges do we have? What are the partnerships that exist on drought? And how can we come up with appropriate policy, advocacy, and implementation measures? The most important thing that I want to say here is the IWG, it's a political process, making sure that there are about 30 members representing all regions, Asia, Africa, Latin America, Western countries, but at the same time also experts. We have 15 experts and 15 political bodies. So they are coming together with the next 1.5 years. They are really discussing on how to institutionalize drought preparedness, on how to make sure that we are going to prepare for drought in a more effective manner, so that we don't wait for countries to declare drought and emergency and then we react. So we can minimize impacts of drought by doing so. So final remarks that I want to say is we need to leverage drought as a connector among sectors. It's a challenge, drought, but it's also an opportunity for countries to work together, for sectors to work together, because it affects everyone. It affects countries in a region. The need to view drought as an opportunity is a positive approach, narrative, making sure that there are some good cases, even from farmers. There are a number of them that can be learned, that can be upscaled. The role of building capacity of individuals, institutions, and organizations. In many cases, when you see it in the local organizations, communities, they don't even have a computer to make sure that they can use the information that they have. So then we need capacity. That's why capacity is one of the aspects of minimizing vulnerability. We need to support harness modern technology. Every one of us now is using artificial intelligence, mobile. So early warning can really work for everyone at this moment. And the significant role of policy, financing, and decision making. The elephant in the room is about financial resources. I think I have also seen some of the questions in relation to that. So we need to come up with innovative financing mechanisms. It can be insurance, bonds, or funds. They need to strengthen also the links to drought to human security, because drought is not a sector. It can affect, for example, migration, conflict of resources. The conflict in Syria, for example, it was not directly related to the drought, but it has an indirect impact on where they are now because of the consecutive drought of 5 years from 2006 to 2011. Then people started to migrate to the urban areas, and then people started to have some kind of civil unrest, conflict. So there is some links to human security as well. So we need to highlight the uncertainties. We need to have a comprehensive view on droughts, and we need to also have an understanding of the complex pathways of drought and related impacts. Traditionally, drought affects agriculture, but now with this interconnectedness of economies, it can affect transportation, it can affect tourism, health. So we need to really strengthen the institutional mechanism and social values of collaboration on drought institutionalization. That's a very key word for me. And yeah, with this webinar, I think I just would like to say that this is what I want to say, and thank you very much.
And thank you as well, Daniel. Great presentation, good overview, lots of good thoughts and ideas and guidance in there too. You are, of course, very welcome to contact the presenters for more information. I have one eye on the clock, and I can see that's all the time we have right now. Please allow me to conclude today's session by thanking the presenters for taking the time to share their knowledge with us. Really super interesting. I would also like to thank the participants, also on behalf of my good colleagues at UNCCD, for taking the time to join us today. Thanks a lot for that. And finally, I wish you a very good morning, a good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Bye for now.